The midday sun beat down on Sky Lane's bustling market district, and at its heart was a small, unassuming food stall. A plume of fragrant steam rose from the griddle where Lynn Smith, her face smudged with a streak of flour, worked with a practiced, almost rhythmic grace. She poured a perfect circle of batter, spread it thin with a wooden tool, and cracked an egg over it, her movements a blur of efficiency honed by years of repetition. A line of customers snaked down the pavement, drawn in by the irresistible aroma of her famous savory pancakes. "One more with extra chili sauce," Lynn called a regular, a construction worker on his lunch break. "Best in the city." Lynn offered a small, weary smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Coming right up, Mr. Chen." This was her world, the sizzle of all, the scent of scallions, the simple satisfaction of feeding people. It was a humble life, a quiet life, a carefully constructed facade. The friendly chatter died abruptly as a shadow fell over the stall. Three hulking men, led by a wiry figure with a cruel smirk named Jack Miller, swaggered to the front of the line. They reeked of cheap cigarettes and entitlement. Well, Lynn, Jack sneered, his eyes roving over her stall. "Business is good. Time to pay your dues." He slammed a grubby hand on her countertop, scattering a container of sesame seeds. The remaining customers, sensing trouble, began to melt away into the crowd. Lynn's hands stilled over the griddle. She wiped them slowly on her apron, her gaze lifting to meet his. It was a calm, steady look that held no fear. "I pay my city permits, Jack. I don't pay thugs." A ripple of unease went through Jack's men. His smirk tightened into a snarl. "That's not smart talk. A pretty face like yours would be a shame if it got ruined by some hot oil." He gestured toward the bubbling griddle, the threat hanging thick and heavy in the air. One of his goons reached a hand out, aiming to shove her stall over. He never made it. In a motion too fast to follow, Lynn's hand shot out, not in a punch, but with an open palm. She didn't strike his hand. She struck his wrist from below, leveraging his own momentum. The thug yelped, stumbling back into his friends with a crack of bone. Before Jack could react, Lynn spun, grabbing the hot metal spatula. She didn't swing it as a weapon. It used its flat edge to press against the pressure point on Jack's neck. He froze, his eyes wide with shock and pain, the heat a terrifying promise. "My stall," Lynn said, her voice dangerously low, "is not for you to touch." In the distance, a police siren wailed, growing closer. Jack's eyes darted around, the bravado draining from his face. With a final, hateful glare, he and his injured men scrambled away, disappearing into the labyrinthine alleys of the market. Lynn simply turned back to her griddle, her expression unreadable, as if she were merely shooing away a stray dog. That night, the scent of sizzling pancakes was replaced by the aroma of aged sandalwood and freshly brewed oolong tea. Lynn stood on the balcony of a penthouse suite, the sprawling city lights of Sky Lane glittering like a fallen constellation below. The flour-dusted apron was gone, replaced by a simple, but elegant silk cheongsam that hinted at the formidable strength in her frame. The glass door slid open. A man in a crisply tailored military uniform strode onto the balcony. His bearing was ramrod straight, his face carved from granite, and on his shoulders were the insignias of a general. It was General Northwood, a man whose name made governors tremble. He stopped a respectful distance from Lynn and executed a deep, formal bow. "Dragon warrior," he said, his voice a low rumble of deference. Lynn didn't turn. She continued to gaze at the city, her thoughts 1,000 miles away. "Report, Northwood, all preparations are complete for the Sky Lane banquet," he stated. "As you commanded, it will be held on Sophia's birthday. The invitations have been sent. Every significant figure in the city will be there. It is the perfect stage to see who is loyal and who is a weed in need of pulling." at the mention of her daughter's name. A flicker of something soft and vulnerable crossed Lynn's face before being locked away again. Good. But I want to be clear on one point. Sophia is not to know. To her, I am Lynn Smith, the pancake seller. I came back for her. Not to overwhelm her with this. She gestured vaguely at the opulence around them. The power they both knew she commanded. Let her have a normal childhood for as long as possible. I understand, Northwood said, though his expression was laced with concern. But the situation with her father I'll handle, David. Lynn cut in, her tone leaving no room for argument. My only command to you, General, is that my identity remains a secret. At that banquet, you will not know me. Do you understand? Perfectly. Dragon warrior. Her gaze remained fixed on the distant lights. A storm of strategy and the deep, aching longing warring within her. She was a general planning a campaign. But she was also a mother, desperate to reclaim the daughter she'd been forced to leave behind. Miles away, in a room that smelled of mildew and despair. That same longing was a galaxy away. A single, bare bulb cast a sickly yellow light over peeling wallpaper and a stained mattress. Sophia, small and trembling, was shoved into the room. Her wide, terrified eyes darted around the grimy space. Dad, what's going on? Who are these men? She cried, her voice thin with fear. Her father, David Johnson, a man whose shoulders were permanently slumped in defeat, wouldn't meet her gaze. He wrung his hands, his face pale with sweat. I'm sorry, Sophie. I had no choice. A corpulent man with a greasy smile, chief brown of the city's district council, stepped forward, his eyes sliming over the terrified child. He handed David a thick wad of cash. A wise choice. Johnson, your debt is cleared. You sold me. Sophia whispered, the realization dawning with gut-wrenching horror. Dad, you sold me. David flinched, finally looking at her with eyes full of pathetic self-pity. He's a powerful man, Sophie. He can give you a better life. I lost everything before he could finish his litany of excuses. The motel room door exploded inward, splintering off its hinges. Lynn Smith stood framed in the doorway. But this was not the gentle pancake seller. Her eyes were chips of ice, burning with a cold, terrifying fury that seemed to suck the air from the room. She ignored David, ignored the fat official, her entire focus on the two guards blocking her path to Sophia. Get away from my daughter, she commanded, her voice a low growl. The guards, emboldened by their numbers, smirked and moved to grab her. They were a flash of movement, and then they were a heap of broken limbs on the floor. Lynn didn't use complex techniques. It was raw, brutal efficiency, an elbow to a throat, a knee to a sternum. It was over into seconds. She strode into the room, her gaze finally landing on the cowering David. Sophia stared, frozen, her mind struggling to reconcile the two images. This avenging angel of terrifying violence couldn't be the same woman who had gently wiped flour from her cheek just yesterday, who she only knew as her estranged mother's friend. Aunt Smith, as Lynn's protective presence enveloped her, Sophia could only watch, a maelstrom of fear, confusion, and a dawning, unbelievable sense of what churning inside her. The air in Charles Brown's office was thick with the scent of expensive leather and self-importance. Lynn stood before his sprawling mahogany desk, her simple clothes a stark contrast to the gilded opulence. Her voice, however, held more authority than anything in the room. You used my daughter as collateral for a construction bid, Lynn stated, her tone a blade of ice. You put her in a room with armed thugs and thought you'd get away with it. Brown leaned back, a smirk playing on his fleshy lips. He swirled amber liquid in a crystal tumbler, studying Lynn as if she were a curious insect. Collateral, my dear woman. She was a guarantee. A small one, at that. He chuckled. You should be thanking me. Her father's project will bring jobs to this city. He gestured dismissively to the two colossal guards flanking the door. Now, get out, or these gentlemen will be forced to undress you of your illusions. I'm the chief of Northfield. I have dinner with General Northwood next week. Who are you? A pancake seller. The guards advanced, their knuckles cracking in anticipation. Lynn didn't move as the first man reached for her, his arm a meaty pillar. She sidestepped with liquid grace. Her hand shot out, striking a nerve cluster at the base of his neck. He collapsed without a sound. The second guard lunged, only to have his wrist caught, twisted, and his own momentum used to slam him into the wall with a sickening thud. The entire exchange took less than 3 seconds. Silence descended, broken only by the clink of ice as Brown's glass trembled in his hand. Lynn turned her cold gaze back to him. Dinner with the general. Does he know his name is being used to legitimize a man who skims 40% of public works contracts? Or that the Northfield Prosperity Fund is just a shell corporation for your gambling addiction? The smirk on Brown's face melted, replaced by waxy pallor. The casual arrogance evaporated, leaving behind a raw, primal fear. This woman wasn't just a fighter. She was an intelligence operative. The pancake stand was a cover. Who was she? Who sent you? He stammered, his voice a reedy whisper. Lynn stepped closer, leaning over his desk until he was forced to shrink back in his chair. A mother. Back in the cramped, dimly lit apartment, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, hugging her knees. The terror of the day had subsided, leaving a confusing ache in its place. I had a dream once, she said softly, not looking at Lynn, who stood quietly by the door. I was little, and I fell. A woman picked me up. She looked like you. In the dream, she was my mom. Sophia's voice hardened instantly, a wall slamming down. That she's not. My mother abandoned me. She's selfish and horrible. I hate her. The words, rehearsed for years, were meant to sting, and they did. Lynn's stoic expression didn't waver. But inside, a familiar agony twisted. Before she could speak, David Johnson stormed into the room, his face a mask of fury. Get out, he snarled at Lynn. You have no right to be here. You never paid a dime of child support. You left me to raise her alone. It was a blatant lie. Lynn had wired money every single month for 7 years. A son David had squandered on bad baits and worse business ideas. David, don't. Lynn warned, her voice low. Don't what? He sneered, puffing out his chest. He shoved her backward. A clumsy, forceful push toward the door. Look at you. A common pancake maker trying to play hero. Even your own daughter can't stand you. He used Sophia's pain as his shield, his most effective weapon. Sophia watched, a young face a storm of conflict. This woman, Aunt Smith, had saved her. She had faced down monsters with a calm that defied belief, yet her father's words echoed the story she had always been told. David saw her hesitation and pressed his advantage, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant only for his daughter. You see what she is? Nothing. You want to end up like her. You want me to lose my project with Mr. Brown. Is that it? You'll be out on the street selling pancakes with her instead of going to a decent school. He grabbed Sophia's arm. You're going to fix this, now. The grand dining hall of the Northfield Grand Hotel buzzed with the low murmur of the city's elite. Charles Brown sat at the head of a long table, basking in the deference of his sycophants. The scene was shattered when David Johnson appeared, dragging a pale and reluctant Sophia behind him. Mr. Brown, David announced, his smile painfully wide. My daughter has something she wants to say. She feels terrible about her disrespect earlier. He shoved Sophia forward. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, her small body trembling. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, she mumbled, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Brown's eyes roamed over her. A predator assessing his prize. He chuckled, a deep, unpleasant sound. Apology accepted. David, your girl has spirit. If she learns to channel it properly, you'll find my generosity knows no bounds. He made it sound like he was discussing livestock. David's smile widened into a grotesque grin. He saw his opening. Speaking of generosity, sir, my recent debts at the tables, perhaps we could arrange for Sophia to work it off. She's a hard worker. She could serve you personally. Attend to your needs. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby tables. The thinly veiled proposition hung in the air, thick and vile. David was pimping out his own daughter to cover a gambling debt. Sophia's head snapped up. The final, brittle piece of her world, her belief in her father's love, shattered into a million pieces. Humiliation burned her cheeks, hot and shameful. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the man she once adored, now seeing only a monster. She was nothing more than a bargaining chip. At that exact moment, the grand doors to the dining hall swung open. A cold draft swept through the room, silencing the whispers. Lynn Smith stood in the entryway. She took in the scene with a glance, Brown, leering and victorious. David, groveling and vile, and Sophia, standing alone in the center of it all, utterly broken. A fire, cold and absolute, ignited in Lynn's eyes. The pancake seller was gone. The mother was gone. All that remained was the dragon warrior, and she had just found her cause. Her resolve hardened into something unbreakable, something that would burn this corrupt world to the ground to protect the one thing she had left. The Grand Regalia Hotel's banquet hall was a galaxy of artificial light. Constellations of crystal chandeliers cast a fractured, golden glow over a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. A low, confident hum of conversation, punctuated by the clink of champagne flutes, filled the air. Lynn, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored navy blue sheath dress, moved through the crowd with an unforced grace that seemed to repel the room's ostentatious energy. Beside her, Sophia was shrinking, her small shoulders hunched forward as if to ward off the weight of 100 judgmental stares. She felt like a weed in a meticulously cultivated garden, her simple dress a stark cry of inadequacy against the glittering backdrop. Every whisper seemed to be about them, every shared glance a confirmation of her deepest fear. They did not belong. Well, look what the cat dragged in. A sneering voice cut through the nose. Jack Miller, a local developer with a face like a well-fed bulldog, blocked their path. His eyes, small and greedy, raked over Lynn with undisguised contempt. If it isn't the pancake seller. Did you get lost on your way to the kitchen, old hag? A ripple of cruel laughter spread through the nearby guests. Sophia's face burned with a shame so hot it felt like a fever. She tugged on her mother's arm, a silent, desperate plea. Let's go, please. Let's just go. Lynn's expression remained serene, her gaze steady on Jack. We were invited. Charles Brown, another of Jack's cronies, scoffed loudly. This is an exclusive event, celebrating Zachary Williams' confirmation as the new Skyline Commander. It's hosted by General Norwood himself. Invitations were reserved for those with a direct connection to the Dragon Warrior. What connection could you possibly have? He puffed out his chest, preening. Unlike us, of course, our families have supported the Dragon Warrior's initiatives for years. Sophia felt the last of her courage wither. The Dragon Warrior, the city's revered, anonymous protector. These powerful men claimed to know that figure, while her mother was just a woman who flipped pancakes in a tiny stall. The humiliation was a physical ache in her chest. Jack leaned in, his voice a mocking stage whisper. Maybe she's here to prove her worth. I dare you, Lynn. Go to the kitchens and whip up a batch of your famous pancakes. Perhaps if the Dragon Warrior tastes them, she'd take pity on you and let you stay to wash the dishes. The insults were relentless, a hailstorm of condescension. "Show us your invitation," someone demanded. "How could a street vendor possibly get in?" Another jeered. Sophia buried her face in her mother's sigh, wishing the polished marble floor would crack open and swallow her whole. Just as the crowd's hostility reached a fever pitch, a uniformed guard approached. He moved with crisp, military precision, stopping before Lynn. "Miss Smith," he said, his voice clear and formal, cutting through the din. "General Northwood asked me to inform you that you and your daughter, of course, do not require invitations." A wave of confused silence washed over the assembly. Jack's sneer faltered. Charles blinked, his self-important posture deflating. Why would a guard General Northwood's guard publicly validate a nobody? Charles recovered first, his face twisting with renewed suspicion. "She must have bribed him," he spat, pointing an accusatory finger at Lynn. "Or blinded the general with some kind of trick. There's no other explanation." The crowd, easily swayed, began to murmur in agreement. Before the accusations could escalate further, a powerful voice boomed from the grand staircase. "What is the meaning of this disruption?" Zachary Williams descended the stairs, a vision of tailored authority. As the newly appointed Skyline commander, he radiated an almost suffocating arrogance. His eyes, cold and sharp, scanned the commotion and landed squarely on Lynn and Sophia, dismissing them in an instant. The crowd parted for him like the sea for a king. He strode toward them, his lip curled in disgust. "I am hosting a banquet to celebrate my confirmation and honor the dragon warrior," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "Who dares to disrupt the order with this peasant squabble?" He gestured dismissively at Lynn. You have no status, no power. You are just a poor pancake seller. Guards, remove this woman and her child from my sight. They are tainting the very air of this hall." Two guards moved to seize Lynn's arms, but she didn't flinch. For the first time all evening, a flicker of something hard and ancient entered her eyes. She met Zachary's smug gaze with an unnerving calm. "You," she said, her voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight, "have profoundly misjudged the dragon warrior." Zachary Williams laughed, a short, barking sound of disbelief. The audacity of this woman was astounding. "Misjudge? I'm the Skyline commander, the dragon warrior's chosen representative in this city. I can have General Northwood himself punish you for your insolence with a single phone call." To prove his point, he dramatically pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. The crowd watched, breathless, anticipating the final, crushing humiliation of the pancake seller. Sophia squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. But Lynn simply smiled, a cool, knowing curve of her lips. "Go on, then," she challenged softly. "Make the call. I would very much like to see how General Northwood will punish me." Her unwavering confidence was so absolute it was unnerving. A seed of doubt planted itself in Zachary's mind, but he was too committed, too arrogant to back down now. With a flourish, he stabbed the call button and put the phone to his ear, his expression one of smug triumph. The transformation was immediate and horrifying. The smugness on Zachary's face evaporated as if it were a phantom. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving behind a sickly, pale sheen of sweat. His eyes widened in shock, then contracted into unadulterated fear. His hand, holding the phone, began to tremble violently. The entire hall was shrouded in a dead, expectant silence, every eye locked on the crumbling commander. He lowered the phone, his movements stiff and robotic. He stared at Lynn, not as a pancake seller, but as if he were staring into the face of a god. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. When he finally spoke, his booming voice was reduced to a choked, terrified whisper that was nonetheless audible in the profound stillness. "General Northwood's command is his command," Zachary stammered, his gaze darting around at the stunned faces of his guests. He says Miss Smith and this young lady are the distinguished guests of the Dragon Warrior. The silence that followed was no longer expectant. It was absolute. 100 jaws hung open. 100 glasses were frozen halfway to lips. The universe of the Grand Regalia's banquet hall had just tilted on its axis. And at its very center stood the pancake seller, her expression unchanged. Her quiet power finally, terrifyingly, revealed. The opulent banquet hall, once a symphony of clinking glasses and self-important murmurs, was now a tomb of suffocating silence. The air, thick with the scent of fear and fine perfume, crackled around the central figures. General Northwood stood like a marble statue, his presence alone a crushing weight. But it was Commander Williams who moved first, his face a ghastly shade of pale. He grabbed the shoulder of a stunned Charles Brown, his grip bruisingly tight. "Apologize." Williams hissed, his voice a ragged whisper that carried across the frozen room. He shoved the chief of Northfield forward, sending him stumbling. "Get on your knees and apologize to Ms. Smith." "Nah." Charles Brown, a man who had built his career on intimidation, stared at Lynn as if seeing a phantom. The arrogance that had been his armor moments ago had been stripped away, leaving only a trembling, pathetic core. "It's not just me you've offended." Lynn's voice cut through his stammering. It was quiet, yet it commanded the attention of every person in the hall. Her gaze, calm and unyielding, shifted to her daughter. "You insulted my child." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "You called her a little brat. You threatened her." The accusation hung in the air, a final nail in Brown's coffin. Williams's eyes widened in fresh horror. He hadn't known the full extent of the transgression. "Chief Brown, do you want us all to be buried with you?" One of his subordinates pleaded from the edge of the circle, his face slick with sweat. "Just apologize." The collective desperation was a physical force. With a choked sob of utter humiliation, Charles Brown's knees buckled. He sank to the polished marble floor before a 5-year-old girl. His head bowed, his forehead nearly touching the ground. "I am sorry, Miss Sophia," he forced out, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "I was wrong. I'm garbage. Please forgive me." Sophia flinched, hiding a little more behind her mother's leg. This was the man who had yelled at her, who had made her feel small and scared. Now he was on the floor, brought low by power she couldn't comprehend. She looked up at her mother, at her calm posture and unwavering expression. A strange new feeling began to bloom in her chest. Her mother, the woman who flipped pancakes and sang silly songs, was important. She was powerful. She was safe. Lynn rested a reassuring hand on Sophia's shoulder, then looked down at the groveling men. "I accept your apology," she said, a tone devoid of triumph, filled only with a profound weariness. She turned her gaze to Commander Williams. "Let this be a lesson, Commander. Never assume you know a person's worth. Never look down on others. The world is larger than you think." Williams nodded frantically, sweat beading on his brow. Yes, of course." A lesson learned. Desperate to salvage some semblance of the evening's original purpose, he tried to pivot, to remind everyone of the social order he understood. "Speaking of which," he began, his voice strained with false cheer, "as a mere pancake seller, I mean, as a humble citizen, what magnificent gift did you prepare for the Dragon Warrior's daughter?" He gestured grandly, hoping to reframe Lynn as an outsider, a commoner who had simply gotten lucky with a powerful connection. His question was answered not by Lynn, but by the sound of heavy, reverent footsteps. 2 of General Northwood's elite guards marched into the center of the room. They carried between them a chair so magnificent it silenced the remaining whispers. Carved from a single piece of dark, lustrous wood, It was a throne in all but name. Intricate dragons with eyes of inlaid jade coiled up its legs and across its high back, their scales shimmering under the crystal chandeliers. This was not merely a gift. It was a symbol, an artifact of legend, the dragon warrior's chair, said to be reserved for the warrior alone. A greedy light sparked in Williams's eyes. He straightened his uniform, a pathetic hope blooming on his face. For me, he thought, a gesture of forgiveness from the general. Sophia, however, saw only beauty. "Mommy, look," she whispered, her eyes wide with innocent wonder. "It's so pretty." The dragons looked like they're smiling. A soft, genuine smile finally touched Lynn's lips. It was a smile of pure, maternal love that seemed to momentarily erase the tension in the room. She knelt down to Sophia's level, her voice a gentle murmur meant only for her daughter. "Do you want to sit in it, sweetheart?" The collective intake of breath was a physical shockwave. Williams froze, his face contorting in a mask of disbelief and terror. The guests gasped, some covering their mouths. To even suggest such a thing was blasphemy. That chair was a sacred object, a representation of the nation's ultimate protector. To allow a child to sit on it was an unthinkable desecration. "No, you can't," Williams blurted out, his voice cracking. "That is the dragon warrior's chair. It is the ultimate symbol of power." Only the warrior he trailed off as Lynn slowly stood up, her gaze sweeping over him, over the shocked faces of the elite, and finally settling on her daughter, who was now being gently guided towards the throne. The quiet authority that had radiated from her all night coalesced into something tangible, an undeniable aura of command. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it resonated in the very bones of everyone present, imbued with a truth that was as absolute as gravity. "If I tell you that I am the dragon warrior," she said calmly, "do you believe it?" The world stopped. Time, sand, and breath were suspended in that one impossible question. Sophia, now seated on the grand, imposing throne, looked small, yet regal. The jade-eyed dragons seemed to stand guard over her. She stared at her mother, and in that moment, everything clicked into place: the strange deference of the general, the sudden terror of powerful men, the unshakable strength that had always been there, just beneath the surface of the pancake cellar she knew. The woman standing before her was not just her mummy, she was a legend. And in Sophia's wide, adoring eyes, a universe of awe, understanding, and profound love dawned anew.